The freezing wind howled outside, violently rattling the thin glass panes of the living room window. It was midnight when David finally stepped into the pitch-black apartment, his entire body aching with exhaustion. He had just finished a brutal 12-hour shift at the auto repair shop, right after a morning shift at the warehouse. His hands were stained with engine grease, and his mind was a heavy fog of worry about the past-due electricity bill sitting on the kitchen counter. The apartment was freezing. The old building heater had broken down again, leaving the air so cold that David could see his own breath. He shivered, immediately thinking of his 8-year-old daughter, Patricia. He had to check on her and ensure she was wrapped tightly enough to survive the bitter cold. David tiptoed down the creaky hallway, his heart heavy with guilt. He barely saw Patricia anymore. He was working himself into the ground to provide for his little girl, but lately he felt more like a ghost haunting the house than a dad. He reached the end of the hall and gently pushed Patricia's bedroom door open, expecting to see a neat pile of blankets on the mattress. But when his eyes found the bed, his breath caught in his throat. The mattress was completely empty. The pink comforter was neatly smoothed out, and the white pillow hadn't been touched. A cold wave of pure terror rushed through David's chest. "Patricia?" he whispered frantically. "Patricia, where are you?" He stepped into the room, his eyes scanning the shadows. That was when he noticed a small patch of fabric squeezed into the narrow, dark gap between the edge of the mattress and the freezing bedroom wall. David dropped to his knees on the floorboards. He leaned over the side of the bed and looked down into the tight space. There lay Patricia. She was curled up tightly in a ball on the bare, dusty hardwood floor, her knees tucked all the way up to her chin. She was wearing her thinnest summer pajamas, and her small frame was shivering uncontrollably. But it was what she was holding that stopped David's world completely. Pressed tightly against her chest, gripped by her small, cold hands, was a heavy, glass-fronted wooden picture frame. It was the old photo that usually sat on the mantelpiece, a picture taken 5 years ago, right before Patricia's mother had passed away. In the photo, David was younger, laughing brightly in the summer sun, holding a toddler-aged Patricia on his shoulders. Patricia was clutching that picture so tightly to her heart that her knuckles were completely white. Even in her sleep, tears were leaking from her closed eyes, leaving wet tracks down her pale, shivering cheeks. "Patricia, oh baby, no," David choked out, a sob rising in his throat. He reached down into the narrow gap, his rough hands trembling as he gently scooped her small body up off the freezing floor. He pulled her onto the bed, immediately grabbing the thick pink comforter and wrapping it around her shivering shoulders. He rubbed her arms fiercely, trying to force warmth back into her body. Patricia's eyelids fluttered open slowly. She blinked against the dim light, looking confused and frightened, still gripping the heavy picture frame tightly. "Dad?" she whispered, her voice shaking. "Are you home?" "I'm here, Patricia. I'm right here," David said, his voice thick with emotion. He sat on the edge of the mattress, pulling her closer to him. "Why were you on the floor, baby? Why aren't you sleeping in your warm bed? And why do you have that photo?" Patricia looked down at the wooden frame in her hands. She bit her trembling lower lip, and a massive sob tore through her tiny body. "Please tell me what's wrong," David pleaded, his own eyes burning with tears. He gently touched her chin, lifting her face. "Please tell me." Patricia looked up at him, her big, tear-filled eyes looking terribly sad. "I was scared, because I thought my real dad was fading away. I thought he was disappearing completely." The heartbreaking reason. The words felt like a physical blow to David's chest. "What do you mean, fading away?" "I'm right here." "No, you aren't," Patricia whispered, her voice full of deep, crushing loneliness. "You're never here. When I wake up, you're already gone. When I go to sleep, the house is still empty. And when you are home, you don't really see me. You just look at the bills on the table. Your face is always so tight, and your eyes look so sad. You never laugh anymore, Dad." She squeezed the picture frame even tighter against her pajamas. "I came out to the living room tonight because I was lonely and cold," Patricia sobbed. "I looked at this picture on the shelf. I realized I couldn't remember what your happy face looked like in real life. I got so scared that the sad version of you was going to swallow the happy version forever. I took the picture to my room because I just wanted to see you smile again," she continued. "But then I looked at my bed, and I felt so guilty. I know how hard you work to pay for this apartment and my clothes. I felt like I was taking up too much space and costing you too much money, so I got on the floor. I thought if I slept in the dark, hidden away, I wouldn't use up the blankets, and maybe you wouldn't have to work so hard. I just held your happy face so I wouldn't be scared." David sat in the freezing darkness of the bedroom, and the tough walls he had built around his heart completely collapsed. A heavy, violent sob tore out of his chest. He covered his face with his rough hands, tears streaming through his fingers. He had spent years believing that being a good father meant working until his bones broke, earning every penny possible, and ensuring his daughter had food and shelter. But in his desperate rush to provide for her physical survival, he had accidentally starved her of the one thing she actually needed: his presence and his joy. His beautiful little girl was punishing herself on a cold floor because she thought her existence was a burden to him. "Oh, Patricia, I am so sorry," David choked out, his voice cracking with immense pain. He threw his arms around her, pulling her small, shivering body tightly against his chest. He held her with desperate strength, letting his tears fall heavily into her hair. "Listen to me, Patricia," David said fiercely, pulling back just enough to look into her eyes. He took the heavy wooden picture frame from her hands and set it gently on the nightstand. "You look at my face right now. Look at me." Patricia blinked through her tears, looking at her father's face, which was wet with tears and twisted with absolute love. "You are not a burden," David said, his voice ringing with absolute certainty. "You are the only reason I breathe. When I work, I do it because I want to take care of you. But I was wrong. I was so wrong to let the stress change who I am. Your bed does not cost too much money. You do not take up too much space. I will never, ever let you sleep on that floor again." David forced a massive, watery smile across his face, despite the pain in his heart. "See this? This is my happy face, and it belongs to you. From now on, you don't need to look at a piece of glass to see it. I promise you, I will be here." Patricia wrapped her arms around his neck, hugging him tightly. "I love you, Dad. I love you more, baby," David whispered. David stayed in Patricia's room for the rest of the night. He pulled the blankets over both of them, holding her close until her shivering completely stopped and her breathing became peaceful. The next morning, David called the warehouse manager and resigned from his morning shift. He knew it meant their budget would be tighter, and they would have to stick to strict meals. But as he sat at the kitchen table, he realized that a few extra dollars could never buy back the childhood his daughter was losing. From that day on, David established a new rule. No matter how tired he was from his job at the auto repair shop, the first hour of every morning and the last hour of every night belonged exclusively to Patricia. They cooked simple breakfast together, read stories before bed, and David made sure to talk to her, to listen to her stories, and most importantly, to laugh. A few months later, the winter had passed, and a warm spring breeze was blowing through the window. David arrived home at 10 p.m., his body tired, but his mind peaceful. He dropped his keys on the counter and walked down the hallway to check on his daughter. He pushed the door open quietly. The soft moonlight illuminated the room. David looked down at the narrow gap between the bed and the wall. It was completely empty. Then he looked up at the mattress. Patricia was fast asleep, sprawled out comfortably, right in the very center of her bed, her arms flung wide, and a peaceful expression on her face. On the nightstand beside her, the old wooden picture frame sat facing the wall. Patricia didn't need to hold on to the memory of her dad's happy face anymore, because every single day she woke up to the real thing.